Some of you may remember the demo we were shown for Halo 2 during E3 of 2003. While the demo wound up not being the final product we received, I still feel it's a fairly accurate representation of what they were wanting to give the world for Halo 2. Unfortunately, due to technological limitations of the time, the scope that they had for the demo wasn't available to put onto the Xbox at the time. Another channel, Rocket Sloth, did a really good in-depth video about what happened with the Halo 2 demo and the development process of the game itself, and how it was still just a baseline miracle that they were able to pull it off. I'll leave a link in the description below, as I highly recommend watching the video because it's an interesting watch. With the stellar success that Halo CE was, Bungie had more pressure on them than ever to knock this release out of the ballpark from fans and Microsoft alike. Another interesting thing to keep in mind is that broadband internet was finally becoming widely available. With more people making the transition from dial-up to broadband internet, what this meant was with a more solid infrastructure, people were able to interact with and purchase Xbox Live and Xbox Live services, so there was more of a demand for multiplayer and multiplayer games. Microsoft had to strengthen the foundation that they had established with Xbox Live 2 years prior, and they even had to pull some of Bungie's development team to help further the development for Xbox Live. While certain assets made their way from the demo into the game, and certain mechanics made their way from the demo into the game, where I feel Bungie really outdid themselves from Halo CE into Halo 2 was delving more into the story and the lore itself. Overall, to cap off this introduction, I still remember the excitement that I felt when I first saw that demo, and then I remember the disappointment that I felt when I first got the game and it wasn't what they had showcased. But I still feel that Bungie absolutely outdid themselves with Halo 2. With the opening cutscenes of Halo 2, we get to see what's been going on with Master Chief, and as well as what's going on inside the Covenant. We get to see Thel 'Vadam, who later becomes the Arbiter, getting the ever-loving shit tortured out of him. Here he's screaming a safe word, but the brutes aren't wanting to give him any kind of solace. When you finally get to play as Master Chief, you're in an awkward staring contest with a guy who's telling you to calibrate your settings. Then Sergeant Johnson comes in and asks you what the hell you're doing, and you tell him nothing, and you awkwardly run into the elevator to get on with the game. The rest of the level is a mixed bag of you going around telling the Covenant to pound salt until you finally get to the end. When you get to the end of this level, it is easily one of the most memorable moments in Halo 2, if not the Halo series all around. The ultimate badassery that Master Chief displays here is just something else. Every time I see it, it's just like I'm seeing it for the first time all over again.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
When I first heard that line of him requesting to leave the station, giving the Covenant back their bomb, I didn't know what love was until that moment. But after that moment, I knew. Followed by this.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
Something I want to throw in here real quick is that while they did an absolutely amazing job with the remastered cutscenes, you got to keep in mind that when I saw it for the first time when I was a kid, this is how the cutscenes looked to me. You might go back and look at the original graphics and be like, wow, those look like shit and they didn't age well. But this is how they looked to me at the time. No joke. The other great thing about Halo 2 is not only did they just present the Arbiter story, but they let the player play as the Arbiter. It really helped to encapsulate the universe that they were building as a whole. In Halo 1, you were only getting a vague idea of who the Covenant were, the struggles between them and humanity, what the Ring was, what the Ring's functionality was, the Flood, etc. I could go on. But at least in Halo 2, there was already that foundation that they could build off of, and so it just drew the audience in even more. One can't help but sympathize with the Arbiter's situation. He knows he's a dead man walking, or a dead alien walking, I should say, but he's just trying to do whatever he can to make amends and redeem himself in the eyes of the prophets and the Covenant as well. Though the Arbiter is still ignorant to the ring's functionality and what the Great Journey is, he's still too humbled to be counted among the ranks of the Arbiters and is carrying too much shame to try and question anything else. It isn't until later on in the game when he gets betrayed by the Prophets and Tartarus and the Gravemind opens his eyes to the situation does he finally start to carve his own path. The story that Bungie was painting with the Arbiter in Halo 2 could have been its own standalone game. It essentially has everything that you need. It has his fall from grace, the struggles he has to gain his esteem back in the eyes of his colleagues, if he can gain it back at all, the subsequent betrayal, and his redemption when he realizes the true scope of what's going on, and when he's forced to work alongside with Master Chief. In the interim, when you're not getting absolutely bitch slapped by the Jackal snipers or everything else in between, you can do some cool tricks with tanks. Taking out the Scarab was one of the most memorable moments of the campaign for me. Up until that point, the Scarab had been a looming force in the background that you couldn't deal with, but being able to hop on it and take out the crew and then watch Master Chief walk out of the flaming wreckage made me realize he was the greatest video game character at that time. After going through all of that and witnessing the largest Covenant fleet anyone has ever seen, and dying to the Prophet of Regret boss fight many, many times, Master Chief realizes he's going to need some help. First, I just want to say that the Prophet of Regret on Legendary can go eat a dick. For any of you out there who are into technical stuff, well, here you go. Master Chief has his encounter with the Gravemind and gets drug off into the depths and don't know what happens to him until the next cutscene. In the interim, you get to play as the Arbiter again and see the game through his perspective one more time. You're trying to go back through the library and get the key to activate the ring. There's actually some funny stuff you can do on the library when you go through it. You can either just run past the enemies and hurry up and activate the ducts that you need to go through, or you can find some god spots where the AI just won't be able to detect you and you can just have an easier time to get through the level. The rift that had been developing between the elites and the brutes really comes to fruition in the moment when Tartarus reveals to the Arbiter that it was the Prophets who ordered his assassination. Truth is using Regret's death as an excuse to drive the elites out and bring the brutes in by saying the elites weren't strong enough to protect Regret, but Truth wanted Regret to die because of his hasty action. And just when you think Halo 2's story couldn't throw you another curveball, that's when we get introduced to the Gravemind, and it drops one of the greatest video game lines in history.
What is that?
I am a monument to all your sins.
This is where Master Chief and the Arbiter are stuck between a rock and a hard place. The Gravemind has them exactly where it wants them, and they know they are in no position to say so otherwise. This is also where the Arbiter's eyes are finally starting to be open to what the ring's functionality is, and he's also given an opportunity to get back at those who have wronged him. During the Gravemind mission, you get to see how more of the conflict has boiled over into an all-out civil war. It's no longer just murmurs between the ranks about rebellion. It's all out in the open. We also get to see the lengths that Truth will go to see his mission through, even if it means sacrificing Mercy.
Let him be. The great journey waits for no one, brother. Not even you.
Not to anyone's surprise, but you wind up getting betrayed by the Great Mind. Shocker, I know. Who would have guessed the all-seeing tentacle monster that is the hive mind of an entity that wants to eat all life in the universe would have stabbed you in the back? Quick side note, the only thing that's just as much of a pain in the ass as the Jackal Snipers on Legendary are the brutes with the brute shots on Legendary. Man, they are brutal. This is where Master Chief takes it upon himself to not let Truth get away, and he winds up boarding his ship as a stowaway. Unfortunately, this is where the game ends with you and Master Chief, but you wind up having one last mission that you can play, and you switch back to the Arbiter, and this is when the Arbiter finally gets his chance to kick some ass and take some revenge, especially against Tartarus on the Great Journey. The Great Journey consists of a variation of vehicle sections and fighting on foot along with your allies. After you tell the Wraiths, "Show me your moves," you go onto a different part of the level where you get to fight with your allies. But you gotta watch out for the brutes with the brute shots because they will absolutely annihilate you. In the same area with all the brutes, you gotta watch out for Jackal Snipers as well. But once you get through that and another couple of sections on foot, then it's onto the final vehicle section before you get to fight Tartarus. If you're playing through the Great Journey on Legendary, just be very mindful of this last section with all the Banshees because they will chew through you before you can realize what's happening. I highly suggest using the tactic where you get their attention, go behind some cover in your own Banshee, and then when they don't have an opportune time to lock onto you, you shoot them from the side or from behind. That's what seemed to work best for me compared to the first trial runs that I had when I played the game for the first time in ages on the Master Chief Collection, and it saved me a lot of time and frustration, so maybe that might help some people out. It's the final confrontation with Tartarus and he's activated the ring. It's only a matter of time before it fires and sets the Great Journey in motion. You can use the platforms to keep your distance from Tartarus while Johnson shoots him and gets his shields down. Inevitably, your ammo will run out and you'll have to jump down, but as long as you're careful of avoiding them, you'll do just fine. With Tartarus dead, your journey is now at an end. Not for good, though. That gets finished in Halo 3. But Key stops the ring from firing just in the nick of time, and then it cuts back to Master Chief for one last moment of absolute badassery. What an amazing note for Halo 2 to end on.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.